Why did NASA provide scientific support for Contact 1997, but refuse to officially attach its name? Nearly 3 decades ago, this film planted an unnamed unease in us. Not a fear of extraterrestrials, but the fear that humanity may never have been ready for the truth. From Carl Sagan's creative last wish to the mysterious 18 hours of static, at the end of the film, Contact shook the boundary between science and faith. Have you truly understood what Ellie saw? Today, we will revisit Contact 1997 to look straight at the questions the film left behind, and the reason why nearly 3 decades later they are still not outdated. 20. One of the rare films quietly supported by NASA but deliberately left uncredited. Few people know that Contact is one of the very rare Hollywood films to receive deep scientific support from NASA, while the agency deliberately chose not to publicly promote its involvement. NASA did not provide funding, but it allowed the filmmakers access to and recreation of real scientific facilities, including imagery and data from SETI, the Very Large Array in New Mexico, and the Arecibo Observatory. NASA scientific advisors were also directly involved to ensure the film accurately depicted the search for extraterrestrial signals from radio data processing to protocols for verifying repeated signals. However, according to Carl Sagan, A Life by Kieh Davidson, a biography confirmed by Ann Druyan, NASA intentionally did not allow its official name or logo to be used in promotional materials. An internal email quoted in the book states the reason clearly. Contact raises philosophical and existential questions that are too sensitive about humanity's place in the universe, going beyond NASA's role as a neutral science communication institution. 19. The opening single-take scene is a masterful visual deception. Do you remember the scene where young Ellie races up the stairs, bursts into the bathroom, and the medicine cabinet mirror opens to reveal her face as if the camera has passed straight through space without a single cut? It looks like a flawless, continuous shot, but Contact cheated quite a bit to achieve it. According to VFX supervisors, Ken Ralston and Steven Rosenbaum themselves, the scene was created by compositing multiple image layers and hiding the camera through a reflection trick. The crew filmed separate elements, the performance, the hallway, and the inside the mirror portion, then stitched them together in post-production so the seam disappears precisely at the moment the cabinet door opens. Behind the scenes VFX analyses have pointed out that this is not a single take at all, but a carefully aligned combination of plates enhanced with digital processing to lock perspective and reflections in place, convincing your brain that everything is perfectly continuous. 18. The Vega machine and the Trojan horse question. The moment the massive metal rings begin to rotate with Ellie standing motionless at the center of the machine, the entire world holds its breath. Not because of the spectacle, but because of a chilling question. What if this is a trap? After decoding more than 60,000 pages of data transmitted from the Vega star system, Ellie's team discovers a crucial detail. The information is not written in 2 dimensions, but in 3 like a spatial blueprint. This detail comes directly from Carl Sagan's novel, as Sagan believed that a superior intelligence would prioritize structural efficiency rather than human-readable formats. But that very discovery ignites the film's biggest controversy. Is the machine a means of transportation, or an alien Trojan horse, something that appears harmless but carries destruction within it? In the film, the US National Security Council is deeply divided, accurately reflecting Cold War-era fears any extraterrestrial technology could also be a weapon. Despite the risks, humanity decides to build the machine at a cost of approximately $250 billion, according to the film's dialogue, shared among the world's major powers. For Sagan, this was not blind recklessness, but a statement: fear cannot be a reason to reject knowledge. 17. Carl Sagan deliberately hid a religious message inside a rigorously rational science film. Carl Sagan is known as an icon of scientific skepticism. He was not religious and consistently emphasized that all claims about the universe require evidence. But Contact is a very special case. It is one of the rare works in which Sagan does not place science in opposition to faith, but allows the two to exist side by side. In the final congressional hearing scene, when Ellie Arroway is asked to prove her journey, science is completely powerless. There is no data, no visual evidence, only personal testimony. According to records and interviews with Anne Druyan Sagan's wife and co-writer, this was entirely intentional. Sagan wanted to structure this scene exactly like a religious debate where personal experience cannot be measured, yet still holds real value for the person who lived through it. 16. Ellie Arroway was also based on an idealized version of Anne Druyan. Recall the scene where Ellie stands alone in the New Mexico desert, headphones on, staring up at the night sky as the entire telescope system faces shutdown. There is no triumphant music, no reassurance, only a female scientist clinging to the one job that gives her a reason to believe she belongs. The character of Ellie Arroway is often said to be based on Jill Tarter, the renowned astronomer and former director of the SETI Research Center. This is true and has been confirmed many times. But according to Anne Druyan, co-author of the novel Contact and creative consultant on the film, Ellie also represents a deeply personal part of herself. In numerous interviews and in the book, Carl Sagan: A Life, Druyan acknowledged that Ellie carries her own experiences of loneliness, suppressed anger, and the feeling of being underestimated by a male-dominated scientific establishment, experiences Druyan herself faced while working with NASA and major scientific institutions. 15. The signal from Vega and the Hitler message. The moment the screen in the control room suddenly fills with the face of Adolf Hitler, his opening speech at the 1936 Berlin Olympics brings the entire room to a stunned silence. It is the most shocking moment in Contact, not because of politics, but because of the cold scientific implication behind it. Everything begins quite cleanly. Ellie Arroway detects a radio signal repeating prime numbers, the classic sign of intentional intelligence. The source is traced to Vega 26 light-years from Earth. That means anything returning from Vega today must be a response to signals Earth transmitted in 1936. And what was the strongest television signal, the first powerful enough to escape Earth's ionosphere? At that time, Hitler's speech at the Berlin Olympics. The film does not use Hitler for moral shock value, but to underline an uncomfortable truth: the universe does not distinguish between good and evil. It simply reflects back what we send out. 14. The ambiguous ending was Carl Sagan's creative last will. Do you remember it? The scene where Ellie falls through the rotating metal rings of the machine, then lands straight onto the safety net. No one sees her disappear. There is only static. Contrary to popular assumption, the ambiguous ending of Contact was not the result of softening the film for mainstream audiences. According to director Robert Zemeckis and the producers at Warner Brothers, this was precisely what Carl Sagan insisted on preserving to the very end. He believed that if an event on the scale of First Contact truly occurred, it would never be presented in a clear, complete, and easily believable way like a typical Hollywood ending. Sagan told the crew that major science always comes with ambiguity. If there were absolute proof, debate would end, and that is not how knowledge advances. Therefore, instead of showing the world where Ellie went, the film chooses to have her return empty-handed, forced to face Congress, the media, and public skepticism. 13. Opening with a signal from the universe. Not a local signal. That line echoes through the control room as orderly sequences of prime numbers begin appearing on the radio monitor. The source is located in the constellation Lyra near Vega, about 26 light-years from Earth. In that exact moment, Contact poses its central question: what would happen if we were no longer alone in the universe? Released in 1997, Contact was directed by Robert Zemeckis with Jodie Foster starring as scientist Eleanor Ellie Arroway. The film does not rush into action, but instead chooses to open with pure science signals frequencies, cross-checking the foundational procedures of SETI. Identifying the signal as coming from Vega, a young bright star, is both physically plausible and close enough to feel within reach. In just a few minutes, Contact establishes its core balance, the excitement of scientific discovery set against collective unease, how politics, the media, and religion might react to evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. From this opening hook, the film invites the audience into a journey that is not only about searching for aliens, but about examining how humanity defines belief evidence and its place in the universe. 12. Is the government hiding the truth? 18 hours of static. At the end of Contact, when Ellie is challenged with the claim that she just dropped straight into the net and that everything might have been a hoax, the film delivers a chilling detail. The recording actually ran for a full 18 hours, but it was concealed and the public was only shown nothing. This idea of there is evidence but no one is allowed to name it is exactly what leaves many viewers wondering. After the film ends, is government cover-up really just a Hollywood trope? Not exactly. In real life, modern history is full of top-secret projects that only became public knowledge years, even decades later. The clearest example is the Manhattan Project, the World War II atomic bomb program, which operated as a network of secret cities, with security so tight that most Americans did not know it existed until the bombs were dropped and President Truman announced it. And what Contact does very cleverly is this. It does not say, the government always hides the truth, but simply reminds us that if a truly world-shattering event were to occur, secrecy mechanisms with real historical precedent would immediately activate. And the truth, if it exists, might only appear in the form of an 18-hour tape of static. 11. A secret symbol repeated throughout Contact, the constellation that is never named. Throughout the film, there is a quietly recurring image, a crescent-shaped arc. It appears at least 4 times, and never once is it explained by any character. The first time, it is popcorn scattered on the floor when Ellie calls out Dad, forming a strange curved line that feels too precise to be accidental. The second time on the beach, where Ellie meets the extraterrestrial entity in the form of her father, crystalline grains in the sand reflect the light and once again arrange themselves into the same arc. The third time, when Ellie is returned to Earth, the symbol appears in the sky, briefly, easily missed. And the final time, in the closing scene, when Ellie returns to her telescope and her scientific career, the image appears once more like a silent reminder. So what is this symbol? According to many film scholars and indirectly confirmed by Anne Druyan in interviews, it is very likely the constellation Corona Borealis, the Northern Crown. Carl Sagan reportedly called this his favourite constellation because its shape resembles a radio antenna dish, a symbol of listening to the universe. 10. Origins with Carl Sagan and Anne Druyan. Contact originated from the imagination and scientific aspiration of Carl Sagan, the astronomer, famous for his mission to bring science closer to the public. Initially, Sagan and Andruyan wrote Contact as a film screenplay in the late 1970s. However, the film project stalled because it was considered too ambitious and too expensive, so Sagan decided to transform the story into a novel which was published in 1985. The book quickly became a bestseller, not only because of its science fiction elements, but because of the very Sagan-like questions it raised. Who are humans in the universe? Are science and belief truly opposed? And if we are not alone, what does that mean? That spirit was directly influenced by Cosmos, a personal voyage, the legendary television series Sagan had made earlier. Like Cosmos, Contact does not try to show off knowledge, but instead guides the audience through curiosity, humility, and a sense of awe before the universe. 9. Eleanor Arroway, Science Loss and Belief. The scene of young Ellie pressing her ear to a homemade radio, calling out to her father in the dark, and receiving only endless static from space. This is not just a childhood memory. It is the moment that shapes the entire life of Eleanor Arroway. Ellie grows up with science not out of ambition, but out of loss. Her father dies when she is still young, and the radio becomes the last thread connecting her to him. From that moment on, listening to the universe is no longer a scientific experiment, but an emotional act. If she listens long enough, far enough, perhaps someone will answer. This motivation leads Ellie to pursue radio astronomy, and later to work for the SETI program, a real organisation dedicated to searching for signals of extraterrestrial intelligence. The character of Eleanor Arroway was created by Carl Sagan, directly based on Jill Tarter, the astronomer and former director of the SETI Research Centre. Jill Tarter herself inspired the image of a determined female scientist, questioned, defunded, but never willing to stop listening. 8. SETI Arecibo and the Science of Listening. The image of Ellie alone at night, headphones pressed tightly to her ears, eyes fixed on a screen of green static. No spaceships, no lasers, just numbers drifting by in silence. Contact is one of the very few science fiction films that chooses to honour passive science that does not seek to conquer or intervene, but simply to listen. Eleanor Arroway's work in the SETI program's search for extraterrestrial intelligence is not about finding aliens in the Hollywood sense. It is far simpler and far lonelier sitting in front of enormous radio telescopes such as the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico or the Very Large Array in New Mexico, listening for faint radio signals from deep space, hoping they are not merely background noise. Carl Sagan and Andruyan deliberately constructed SETI in the film to match real scientific practice. According to the SETI Institute, most of their work consists of waiting. Years, even decades pass without any decisive discovery. No action, no climax, only patience that is almost religious. 7. Science in dialogue with religion. The moment when Eleanor freezes as Palmer Joss asks her, "Prove that you loved your father." That is the moment Contact stops being a science fiction film and begins to pose a direct question about faith. Palmer Joss, played by Matthew McConaughey, is not a traditional priest or a religious fanatic. He is a spiritual thinker who once studied science but chose a path of faith. This character was deliberately constructed by Carl Sagan and Andruyan Palmer, does not confront science with dogma, but with questions that science cannot measure. The relationship between Eleanor Arroway and Palmer Joss is not a conventional romance. It is an extended dialogue between two ways of approaching the world. Eleanor believes in data evidence and probability. Palmer believes that there are human experiences. Love grief, meaning that exist even when they cannot be proven by equations. 6. Disaster terrorism and skepticism. The scene in which the massive Vega machine collapses in a sea of fire just before Ellie even has the chance to step inside is the moment when the entire world of the film seems to freeze. The bombing that destroys the first machine in contact is not merely a dramatic shock. It is the film's blunt declaration that ultimate knowledge always comes with the risk of being distorted by fear and extremist belief. The bomber believes the machine is blasphemy, an intrusion into the will of God, and is willing to kill to prevent it. Drumlin's death in this catastrophe carries deep irony. The man who took credit for Ellie's work, who manipulated politics in order to enter the machine himself, becomes a victim of the very system of power and secrecy he represented. The film does not portray him as an absolute villain, but as a human being swept up in forces of power larger than himself. 5. The second machine and a journey kept secret. When the first Vega machine explodes in a sea of fire, taking David Drumlin and dozens of scientists with it, the film leads the audience to believe that everything is over. Humanity has just reached out to the universe, only to have that chance taken away immediately. But that is only what the public inside the film is allowed to know. In a quiet yet deeply unsettling turn, Contact reveals that the government secretly built a second Vega machine, more advanced and fully operational in Japan. The man behind this entire plan is none other than S.R. Haddon, a reclusive billionaire, brilliant engineer, and a familiar embodiment of the idea that private intelligence can outpace the state. According to Anne Druyan and Robert Zemeckis, the detail of the second machine was not meant as a dramatic twist, but as a reflection of an uncomfortable reality. Humanity's most important discoveries often do not happen in public view. They happen in silence behind the scenes and are known only to a very small group. 4. Hidden evidence, 18 hours of static. In the final scene when Eleanor Arroway sits before the Congressional Committee, everything seems to have come to a close. She fell straight through the machine. No one saw her disappear. There were no witnesses, no images, no proof. To the world, the journey never happened, but contact does not end there. In a brief moment, almost easy to miss, a White House official reveals to Palmer Joss that the recording devices installed inside the transport pod did not capture just a few seconds of static as reported to Congress. In reality, they recorded a full 18 hours of continuous data, exactly matching the amount of time Eleanor claims she was gone. This is the key detail of the entire film. From a scientific standpoint, static does not mean nothing. In reality, electromagnetic noise often appears in the presence of enormous energy sources or physical phenomena that are not yet understood. Carl Sagan repeatedly emphasized that science does not reject something simply because it cannot yet explain it. Science records first and understands later. 3. The legacy of Contact and Carl Sagan. As the final scene fades out and Eleanor Arroway sits quietly among a new array of radio telescopes, Contact no longer feels like an ordinary science fiction film. It carries the weight of a carefully written message, slow, deliberate, and leaves the viewer with far more questions than answers. This becomes even more significant when one knows that Carl Sagan passed away just 6 months before the film's release. For nearly 2 decades, Contact was a passion project he pursued together with Anne Druyan, not merely as entertainment, but as a way of saying goodbye to the world through science, through humility, and through the belief that humanity can grow if it learns to listen. Contact is not only a cinematic legacy, it is Carl Sagan's intellectual legacy. A reminder that even though we are small and fragile, The act of asking questions and daring to listen for the answers is enough to give our existence meaning. 2. Contact was nearly killed in the cradle for being too intelligent. As early as the post-production stage, Contact caused real concern at Warner Brothers, not because of visual effects, budget overruns or performances, but because the film was considered too intellectually heavy compared to the standard blockbuster fare of the 1990s. According to behind-the-scenes accounts cited by Anne Druyan and director Robert Zemeckis in multiple interviews, and especially in Key Davidson's book, Carl Sagan, A Life, the studio proposed several changes, such as adding a scene where the aliens appear clearly on screen, or, at the very least, including undeniable proof so audiences could leave the theatre feeling more comfortable. Zemeckis and Druyan categorically refused these suggestions. In the end, Warner Brothers did not interfere with the film's content, but they took another quieter step. They significantly reduced the marketing budget. The studio feared that Contact would be difficult to sell to a mass audience, despite having Jodie Foster in the lead role and Robert Zemeckis as director. 1. The high ratings but deeply divisive. By the numbers, Contact was not a failure at all. With a budget of around $90 million, the film grossed over $170 million worldwide. A solid result for a science fiction movie that did not rely on action set pieces or monsters. On Rotten Tomatoes, its critics' score sits at a respectable level, while the audience score is noticeably higher. The shock lay in the sharply divided reactions among different groups of viewers. According to records from Warner Brothers at the time, the film was highly praised by student science enthusiasts and academically inclined audiences. For them, Contact was a rare, serious contemplative experience within mainstream Hollywood cinema. By contrast, viewers who entered the theatre expecting something like Independence Day or Star Wars were often disappointed. The film has no major climactic battle, no space war, and almost no clear-cut victory moment. So what about you? Which moment from Contact 1997 is the one you remember most? Leave a comment. And if you want to continue unlocking other deleted scenes from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You will be surprised by what Hollywood has kept hidden from you for decades.